Good afternoon. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we begin with a story that has gripped the nation and exposed the dark underbelly of labor migration. The body of 31-year-old Fauza Musubika arrived back in Kenya last week, accompanied by a Saudi Arabian postmortem report stating she died of natural causes. Her family in Kagoma is demanding a full investigation, claiming she had sent messages for weeks complaining of mistreatment by her employers before her sudden death. This case is not isolated. It represents what activists call a systemic failure in the protection of Kenyan migrant workers abroad. Today, we dive deep into this tragedy, examine the broader context of labor migration to the Gulf, and ask what responsibility the Kenyan government bears. Also look at the tools of state surveillance, following a new report alleging Kenyan authorities used Israeli technology to crack an activist's phone, raising questions about priorities. This is a 12-minute special report. Chapter 1, The Tragedy of Fauza Musubika. Our story begins in Kagoma Town Council, Jinja District. Fauza Musubika, a 31-year-old woman seeking opportunity, was hired as a housemaid and left for Saudi Arabia just over 8 months ago. For the first few months, communication home was sporadic but hopeful. Then, about 6 weeks ago, the tone changed. According to family members who shared screenshots with our team, Fauza began sending messages complaining of being overworked, underfed, and verbally abused. She described working an average of 18 hours per day, 7 days a week. Her promised salary of 35,000 shillings per month was allegedly withheld for the final 3 months. The last message her family received was on January 28, 2026. It read in part, "They have taken my passport. I am not well. I want to come home." Her condition, as described in those final messages, deteriorated rapidly. Instead of receiving medical care, her family says she was returned by her employers to the recruitment agency's holding hotel, a common practice when a worker becomes problematic or ill. She died at that facility on February 5, 2026. The official cause, as stated on the Saudi-issued death certificate and post-mortem that accompanied her body, was cardiac arrest due to natural causes. Her family's lawyer, speaking to us, called this medically and morally bankrupt. They point to the timeline. A healthy woman in her early 30s dies after weeks of alleged abuse and confinement. They have now formally petitioned the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the DCI, to launch an independent inquiry, and are seeking a second, Kenyan postmortem. The family's anguish is compounded by statistics. According to data from the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Fauza is one of at least 47 Kenyan domestic workers who have died in Saudi Arabia since January 2025. That's an average of nearly 1 death per week. Chapter 2, The Broken Pipeline. To understand how Fauza got to Saudi Arabia, we must look at the recruitment pipeline. It is a multi-million-dollar industry. Official figures show that in 2025, over 120,000 Kenyans were formally recruited for work in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain. The vast majority, approximately 85%, are women taking up domestic work. They pay recruitment agencies fees averaging 80,000 shillings for placement, visas, and airfare, often going into deep debt. The government licenses these agencies, but oversight is notoriously weak. A 2025 audit by the National Employment Authority found that of 352 licensed agencies, only 112 were fully compliant with regulations. That's just 32%. The rest had violations ranging from overcharging to failing to provide pre-departure training or maintain proper welfare records. Once abroad, protection evaporates. Kenya has labor attachés in key Gulf countries, but they are severely under-resourced. In Saudi Arabia, for instance, one attaché and a team of 4 support staff are responsible for the welfare of an estimated 300,000 Kenyan workers spread across a country 17 times the size of Kenya. The system relies on the kafala or sponsorship system, which ties a worker's legal residency to their employer. This gives employers immense power, including the ability to confiscate passports, restrict movement, and deny exit permits. Fauza's case of a withheld passport is standard. A 2025 survey by the migrant rights group Hakia Wahamiaji found that 72% of returning domestic workers from Saudi Arabia reported their passports were taken by employers. Furthermore, 65% reported working more than 15 hours daily, and 58% experienced some form of physical or psychological abuse. The government's response has been a mix of rhetoric and temporary bans. In August 2025, Labor Cabinet Secretary Florence Bore announced a 90-day suspension of the deployment of domestic workers to Saudi Arabia, citing alarming deaths and abuses. That ban was lifted in November 2025 after what was termed bilateral talks and new safeguards. Critics argue nothing substantive changed. The agreements are not worth the paper they are printed on, says activist Boniface M1G. We sign memoranda of understanding, we get photo ops with Saudi ministers, and then our daughters keep coming home in coffins labeled natural causes. It is a national disgrace. The economic pressure is immense. Remittances from Kenyans in the Gulf totaled over 200 billion shillings in 2025, a vital source of foreign exchange. This creates a powerful incentive to keep the pipeline open, critics say, even at a human cost. Chapter 3, The Surveillance State Contrast, While Families Like Fauza's Struggle for Basic Justice. A new report suggests the Kenyan state possesses and uses sophisticated tools for a very different purpose, monitoring its own citizens. The University of Toronto's Citizen Lab published findings last week, alleging that Kenyan authorities used technology from the Israeli firm Celebrite to break into the phone of activist and aspiring presidential candidate Boniface M1G while he was under arrest in July 2025. Celebrite's tools are capable of extracting deep data from mobile devices, messages, photos, location history, and encrypted app data. The report suggests this capability was used not in a terrorism or major crime case, but against a prominent government critic. This revelation opens a disturbing window into state priorities. The technology is not cheap. A single Celebrite Universal Forensic Extraction Device, or UFED, kit can cost over 15 million shillings. Training and licensing add hundreds of thousands more. How many of these kits does the Kenyan government possess? Which agencies have them? The government has not commented on the specific allegations, with Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Key only stating that security agencies use lawful means to combat threats to national security. But the contrast is stark. Activists ask, why can the state invest millions in technology to crack a single activist's phone, yet cannot afford to station more than 5 welfare officers to protect 300,000 citizens in Saudi Arabia? Why is there such sophisticated follow-through on domestic dissent and such bureaucratic paralysis when citizens are abused abroad? This is not just about Boniface M1G. The Citizen Lab report notes a pattern. Their investigation linked the same Celebrite system to attempts to access devices belonging to at least 3 other Kenyan civil society figures in the past 18 months. The digital rights organization Article 19 documented 12 cases in 2025 where activists and journalists reported unusual phone behavior, rapid battery drain, unexplained restarts, following interactions with authorities, suggesting possible hacking attempts. The state's capacity for digital surveillance appears to be growing, funded from the public purse. Meanwhile, the budget for the National Employment Authority's Migrant Worker Protection Unit was cut by 15% in the 2025/2026 fiscal year, down to 450 million shillings. Chapter 4, Debate Solutions and Accountability. We now bring in the debate. What is to be done? We have 2 perspectives. First, the government's position, as articulated by officials who agreed to speak on background. They argue that diplomacy is complex, and that publicly shaming partner nations like Saudi Arabia could backfire, jeopardizing the jobs of hundreds of thousands of other Kenyans. They point to the newly established 24/7 emergency hotline for distressed workers, which received over 5,000 calls in its first 3 months of operation. They also highlight the arrest and prosecution of 5 rogue recruitment agents in the last quarter of 2025. Their solution is gradual reform through bilateral engagement and better pre-departure training. The opposing view, from civil society and families of victims, is far more radical. They demand immediate concrete action. First, a mandatory, government-conducted postmortem for every Kenyan who dies abroad, with the costs borne by the recruitment agency that placed them. Second, the blacklisting and permanent revocation of licenses for any agency linked to a death or severe abuse case. Third, the establishment of a fully funded, independent migrant worker ombudsman with the power to investigate abuses and sanction both agencies and foreign employers. Fourth, and most controversially, they call for a complete moratorium on the deployment of domestic workers to any country operating the kafala system until it is abolished. We are not exporting slaves, says a spokesperson for the Bring Our Sisters Home coalition. If a system is inherently abusive, we must not participate in it. The remittances are not worth the blood money. The economic argument is central. Proponents of the migration pipeline say it provides crucial livelihoods. But what is the true cost-benefit analysis? Let's look at the numbers. While remittances are 200 billion shillings, the human cost is steep. Beyond the 47 confirmed deaths, the cost of repatriating distressed workers, providing medical care, and supporting traumatized returnees is borne by families and NGOs. The government's own fund for repatriation is chronically underfunded. In 2025, it assisted only 327 workers, a fraction of those in need. The debate ultimately boils down to a question of value. How does Kenya value the life and dignity of its citizens, especially its women, against the allure of foreign currency and diplomatic convenience? Chapter 5, A Family's Fight and a Nation's Conscience. We return to Kagoma, to the family of Fauza Musubika. They are not activists or politicians. They are a grieving family who took out a loan to give their daughter a chance. They now face not only her loss but a fight against two formidable systems, a foreign bureaucracy that has declared her death an act of nature, and a domestic one that seems ill-equipped or unwilling to challenge that finding. Their lawyer tells us the second postmortem is scheduled for next week. They wait, hoping for evidence of trauma, of neglect, anything to contradict the words natural causes. Their fight echoes a larger struggle for Kenya's soul. The juxtaposition of this case with the revelations about surveillance technology paints a picture of a state with powerful tools, but perhaps a confused moral compass. It can invest in technology to peer into the private lives of its critics, yet it cannot effectively protect its citizens who venture abroad in search of a better life. As the 2027 election cycle begins to warm up, with figures like Boniface Mwangi entering the fray, this tension between state control and citizen protection will only intensify. The question for every Kenyan is this: what kind of nation do we want to be? One that watches its own with suspicion, or one that fights for them, no matter where they are? Fauza Musubika's name adds to a grim tally. Her family's quest for truth is a test for Kenya's institutions. Will they investigate with the same vigor they might apply to a political opponent's phone? The world is watching. The Gulf's skyscrapers were built in part by the labor of women like Fauza. The least she deserves is a truthful accounting of how her life ended within them. That is not just her family's demand. It should be a national imperative. Thank you for watching this deep dive. We will continue to follow this story. For now, this is Kenya News Update Today. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today.